In Waukesha, it's 46, and in Milwaukee, it's 49. I'm Sean Brunda. Signing Unlimited, WTMJ News Time is 6:07.
Career politician Tammy Baldwin wasted trillions of dollars and created crushing inflation. Baldwin opened our borders and gave taxpayer benefits to illegal immigrants. And she voted to put men in girls' sports. Enough is enough. Businessman Eric Hovde will stop inflation, secure the border, and defend our Wisconsin values. Here's Eric Hovde.
You have a clear choice in this election. Senator Baldwin is a 38-year career politician. I'm a businessman and job creator. She supports taxpayer benefits for illegal immigrants. I'll close the border. Tammy wants to put guys in girls' sports and in their bathrooms. I'll protect our daughters. Senator Baldwin abuses the political system. I'll fight the corruption. I'm Eric Hovde, candidate for U.S. Senate, and I approve this message. Join my team and give today.
Visit WisconsinVictoryJFC.com to give today. Paid for by Wisconsin Victory Committee.
It's time for Buck Shootaround on WTMJ. We get you warmed up, stretched out, and ready for tip-off. This is Buck Shootaround. Now, here's your host, Justin Garcia.
Bucks in Memphis this Halloween evening, looking to move closer to 500 and just erase some of the memories of a 1-3 start to the season. I'm Justin Garcia, getting you set for tip-off in Memphis momentarily. For the next 30 or so minutes, we will try to go over some of the things that have jumped out the most about the first week of the season for the Bucks. Unfortunately, we've seen a lot of carryover from a year ago in the areas I think everybody was pretty cognizant needed to be cleaned up. And we'll hear from Doc Rivers coming up on the network coverage of our pregame. But Doc Rivers remains unconcerned and said, look, it's there. We can see it. He said after the loss to the Boston Celtics, we feel good where we're at. We know we'd love to win some games. And frankly, there were two games we should have won against the Chicago Bulls and the Brooklyn Nets. And now it's trending towards that with this Memphis Grizzlies team as well, a team that, we mentioned coming into the season figured to be much improved. But when we talk about the Bucks seeing things creep in there again that kind of doomed them a season ago, the same can be said already for the Memphis Grizzlies, who once again are dealing with a mountain of injuries, which was basically the calling card of that team last season. But it didn't matter in those two matchups against the Bucks. But after that game Friday in Boston, Doc Rivers remained very optimistic and said, we feel good about where we're headed. We like some of what we're seeing. Shared some more insights on that before today's game as well in the media availability you'll hear momentarily. But just repeated the same. Look, obviously we would have liked to have won more games than to be in this 1-3 spot. A 1-3 spot with a very challenging schedule that still remains in front of the Bucks, but overall, we still feel like it's getting there. And even today, the one thing I'll give away that he said, now, obviously, Chris Middleton, we've yet to see. That's not going to change tonight. He is out once again against the Memphis Grizzlies. But said, still finding the lineups at work. I understand there's some that haven't looked great so far. Some we do really like, and we've seen the process there and like what we see. But some of the ones that we don't like, we don't really have any other options with no Chris Middleton and with guys on minutes restrictions. So that's part of what we're seeing, what you guys don't see. What we go through in practice, some of the things we go through in film review and everything else. I like what I'm seeing there. And again, I think there's a turn that's coming here. I think we're going to go on a run relatively soon here. The schedule I mentioned for this team, I think kind of swept under the rug coming into the season, all the optimism over not only a good offseason for the Bucks, Gary Trent Jr., DeLon Wright, and Taurean Prince to get all three of those players on veteran minimums. In itself, getting those caliber players for the price tag you got them on, when that was all you had to spend, in itself, that is a successful offseason, but especially the fit. I think I mentioned this quite a few times already. The roster just fits better than it did a season ago. When you acquired Damian Lillard on the eve of training camp, and you had built a roster with the assumption that you didn't have Damian Lillard. You had Drew Holiday. And for all of the ups and downs that we saw a season ago with this backcourt, for everything you could point to and say Malik Beasley was a problem there, well, it looks a lot different if Malik Beasley is playing alongside Drew Holiday. And at the time of that move, that was the assumption and the thought. So now you had a full off season to know Damian Lillard is here. Giannis is here. Chris Middleton and Brook Lopez were both free agents a season ago. And up until that first week of free agency, there was still a heightened level of concern that you were going to lose Brook Lopez. So there was a lot of unknown and a lot of kind of building the plane while you're in the air a season ago. You have had the benefit of not being there to know here are the players we know are here. Let's target guys that not only are upgrades, but are going to fit what we want to do. And I think that's what you get in all three of those guys. You have massively upgraded the coaching staff as well. Again, not a knock on any of the coaches that are no longer here. It just was not an experienced staff. You bring in Darvin Ham, who obviously has the connections with a number of players on this team and the city of Milwaukee and the organization, but he has experience as a head coach. You still have Joe Prunty, who probably holds the NBA record for most stints as an interim head coach. Dave Yeager joined the staff a year ago. He has head coaching experience and familiarity with Doc Rivers, and same with Rex Kalamian. And Greg Buckner, one that doesn't get quite as much a mention, or didn't, I should say, before the season started, only because of the fact that you're bringing back Darvin Ham. That's the storyline. But Greg Buckner, a highly experienced coach, the associate head coach for the Cleveland Cavaliers for the previous 4 seasons before joining the staff. So there are massive upgrades there as well, and these are all things that Doc Rivers feels are going to bode well relatively soon here. But that's the challenging part, is soon, and how soon, because of these first 10 games that the Bucks are playing this season. So I'll explain a little more what I mean by that and take a look at the latest out of Memphis. There was one player on the injury report as questionable. Any updates we have on that as the Bucks look to do something they could not do a season ago and haven't had a whole lot of success in recent years, beat the Memphis Grizzlies. We'll get into that conversation coming up after this on Bucks Shootaround.
If you're experiencing low energy, brain fog, or bloating, then your body might need a detox. Active Liver from New Nordic makes it easy to help your liver to detox your body all year long without any major changes to your diet or lifestyle.
My name is Anton Moore. Around here, we have hardworking people that just need a break. Whether it's investing in small businesses or making housing affordable, Vice President Harris gets it.
Kamala Harris is making sure black men have the tools to build generational wealth. She'll put a policy in place that gives 1 million forgivable loans to help entrepreneurs, including black entrepreneurs, start their own businesses. She also plans to give $25,000 in down payment assistance for first-time homeowners and crack down on racial bias in home appraisals. Harris's plan will help black men own more assets so we can build long-term wealth.
This is what an investment in my community looks like. We're trying to build generational wealth. No get-rich-quick schemes, no scams, no one-time check, none of that. Vice President Harris got our back. I'll be there on November 5th. Will you be there?
I'm Kamala Harris, candidate for president, and I approve this message.
Paid for by Harris for President.
Now, more of Bucks Shootaround on WTMJ.
So these first 10 games for the Bucks certainly have not gone as planned so far, 4 games in. But just looking at your opponent win percentage from a season ago, and with a lot of these teams, there isn't much change in those groups. There's no reason to believe those teams won't be as good as they were a season ago. Looking at the first 10, the Bucks are playing the 4th most challenging schedule in the league. Started with Philadelphia. Now, that game appeared to be more challenging at the time the schedule was made when you assumed Paul George and Joel Embiid would both be playing in that game. But you had the Sixers on the road, the Celtics on the road. This Grizzlies team that is dealing with injuries once again, but they were a highly touted team coming into the season. They got all their injured players back. Marcus Smart missed a lot of last season. Desmond Bane was in and out of the lineup. Both of those players are going to miss tonight. Same for John Morant. They added Zach Edey, so they figured to be a much better team this season. Yet Memphis on the road. 2 games back-to-back with the Cleveland Cavaliers, 1 home and 1 road. The New York Knicks on the road. The Boston Celtics, and then lost in the shuffle of those 10, 3 games. The Bulls, the Nets, and the Utah Jazz. 3 teams you would look at and say, I don't know if these teams are going to be competing for the playoffs, but the others certainly are. And the others not only certainly are going to be competing for the playoffs, they expect to be pretty high in terms of their seed line. So I know we knew, hey, Philly, starting in Philly 3 straight years, it's going to be a tough start with that new-look Sixers team, but up and down through those first 10 games, it's very challenging. And look, you're not going to lose a season in your first 10 games or in your first month and a half. But you can start to let things maybe not slip away, but move to a spot you don't want to be in because of how improved the Eastern Conference is. Because I think we mentioned it before, this team is probably going to be pushed throughout the season. It's not like in years past where in the Eastern Conference you knew there were 3 really good teams, maybe 2 really good teams, and a team just behind them. That's not going to be the case this year when you look at what Cleveland is doing and where Cleveland's been the last few years. Boston, the reigning champions. I think everybody expects, and so far you've seen it, the Magic to take a big jump forward. The Knicks with their heightened expectations this season. Same for the Pacers, who were in the conference finals a year ago. Then, of course, the Bucks and the 76ers that you have. Right now, the Bucks and the 76ers are 12-13 in the conference, each at 1-3. So that's the challenge of these next 6 games, is trying to avoid a 2-8 start, a 3-7 start. Just don't lose that much ground this early, because if you do, with the improved play we've seen from Orlando, maybe Miami lingers around. I still don't think this team is going to be in the play-in tournament, but with how improved the conference is, it is not out of the realm of possibility, especially if you get off to a very, very sluggish start. And that was always the interesting thing about this season when you came into it. It was almost like musical chairs where you were looking around and just saying, I hope I'm not the one that doesn't get a chair here. The Cavs, the Celtics, the Magic, the Knicks, the Pacers, the Bucks, the 76ers, even the Heat. We just rattled off 8 teams. So there are at least 2 teams in that mix that are going to be in the play-in tournament, that are not going to be where they expect their seed line to be, whether it's a 2 seed or a 3 seed like the Bucks or Sixers or Cavs thought. 2 of those teams are not going to be there, and that is something we have not seen in decades in the Eastern Conference. We'll continue to look ahead to tonight's matchup in Memphis, the latest that's coming out of there, as the Bucks look to move to 2-3 on the season. We'll do that after this on Bucks Shootaround.
Any exterior remodeling company can give you a lot of good reasons to get a new roof, siding, windows and doors, or masonry work. Aesthetic appeal alone or just resale value help it all make sense. But I'm compelled to continue to tell you what sets Semper Fi apart from the rest. What you're going to get from Semper Fi is a reputation that is backed by an undeniable stack of proof that we are who we say we are. Our character is guided by a level of trust and accountability which not only holds our teams together, but also keeps our reputation intact. And ultimately, that means leaving you satisfied. So when you're about to make that big investment in your home, isn't that what you want? This is Brad Youngluth with Semper Fi Roofing and Exteriors, your local, veteran-owned and operated exterior remodeling company. For your new roof, siding, window and door installation, or masonry work, you can count on Semper Fi to keep you safe, warm, and dry.
We keep you safe, warm, and dry, Semper Fi!
Career politician Tammy Baldwin wasted trillions of dollars and created crushing inflation. Baldwin opened our borders and gave taxpayer benefits to illegal immigrants. And she voted to put men in girls' sports. Enough is enough. Businessman Eric Hovde will stop inflation, secure the border, and defend our Wisconsin values. Here's Eric Hovde.
You have a clear choice in this election. Senator Baldwin is a 38-year career politician. I'm a businessman and job creator. She supports taxpayer benefits for illegal immigrants. I'll close the border. Tammy wants to put guys and girls sports in their bathrooms. I'll protect our daughters. Senator Baldwin abuses the political system. I'll fight the corruption. I'm Eric Hovde, candidate for U.S. Senate, and I approve this message. Join my team and give today.
Visit WisconsinVictoryJFC.com to give today. Paid for by Wisconsin Victory Committee.
You're listening to Bucks Shootaround on WTMJ.
Final few minutes here on the program as we get set for the Bucks and the Memphis Grizzlies tonight before another rare home game for the Bucks, but against a challenging opponent. Saturday night, the Cleveland Cavaliers, and you were on night 2 of a back-to-back against the Boston Celtics, but the schedule starts to break a little bit in your favor. Granted, the level of competition maybe not so much, but the Grizzlies are on night 2 of a back-to-back tonight. They hosted the Bulls and lost last night. Now, they lost Desmond Bane and Marcus Smart in that game, but it's night 2 of a back-to-back for the Grizzlies. The Cavaliers on Saturday night will be playing on night 2 of a back-to-back. They got 3 games in 5 days. Tomorrow night at home against the Orlando Magic in a matchup granted early is suddenly very intriguing, especially given what Paolo Banchero has been doing so far this season for the Orlando Magic. But tomorrow night, the Cavs host the Magic. Then they come to Milwaukee on Saturday. And the same for that matchup with the Celtics to kind of cap off those first 10 games. It is your only home game against the Celtics this season, but they will also be dealing with a rest disadvantage in terms of their schedule. So while the level of competition is not going to decrease at least until the midpoint of November, you do start to get some breaks by way of the schedule. It ultimately comes down to cleaning things up that we have seen, though. And that was the message from Doc Rivers, especially on the turnover front. It's been a big issue for the Bucks, and especially the fact that those turnovers have oftentimes been live ball turnovers. Now, the moment Doc Rivers arrived last year, we gave it about 10 games where he really started to make some takeaways and look at the sample size. And one of the things that jumped out, the defense. Defensive rating went up immensely. I'm not going to call it fool's gold, but it didn't last. The defense was still performing better than it did prior to the coaching change, but you saw the defense really take a big leap forward, close to the top 10, and then kind of drifted back in the middle of the pack. But what was noticeable with that defense was from day one, you saw this team really reduce the amount of opportunities opponents had in transition against them. That was a major problem for the Bucks the first 2-3 months of the season. You know, when that defense was in the bottom 10 in terms of defensive rating, well, look no further than transition defense. They gave up the most opportunities in the league, and opponents were in the top 5 in terms of efficiency in those opportunities against the Bucks. When Doc Rivers arrived, it started to slide closer to the midpoint, where they're allowing basically league average volume of attempts in transition. And why we point this out is it's just as it sounds. It should, in theory, be the easiest way to score, where you're getting that advantage of transitioning to the other end of the floor. You're out and running. Think about the Bucks' transition offense when you get Giannis on the fast break. And especially with an older team, if you can get them on their heels and get them in scramble mode, we saw that led to good things for opposing offenses a year ago. This year, that's remained constant in terms of the volume. The Bucks continuing to do a good job, or at least much better than where it was a year ago, of limiting those opportunities. They're in the middle of the pack in terms of how frequently they're giving up those transition opportunities. Where it's especially problematic, and this is one of 2 areas that really need to be addressed ASAP, is opponents have been lethal in transition against the Bucks. They have the second best offensive rating against the Bucks than any other team when they get in transition. I don't want to get too nerdy with the description here, but it's a 188 offensive rating in transition off of live ball turnovers. So in other words, this number is calculated by 100 possessions. So if you have 100 possessions, you're scoring 188 points essentially 2 points every single time. That's how dire it's been. So that is one thing that certainly needs to be cleaned up immediately. The other one is something we can very clearly look for tonight. And that is coming out of halftime. Because the third quarter has been a major, major problem for the Bucs. Good news, bad news, right? Good news is, hey, they've been pretty efficient in terms of their scoring and their offense in that third quarter. Great. Averaging 33 points per game, third best offensive rating in the third quarter. The problem has entirely been on the defensive end, where they are dead last in defensive rating in that third quarter and in the bottom 10 in their net rating. So in other words, as good as the offense has been, it's been that much worse, the defense has, that has made them a bad team in the third quarter. And if we look back at these losses, all three of them, you can point to the third quarter where runs happened early in the second half. Chicago Bulls did it, where they took a halftime deficit, pulled ahead and won. Brooklyn Nets built up that lead in the third quarter. And a very, very close game, nip and tuck through the first 24 minutes with the Celtics. It got out of reach in the third quarter because of runs that the Celtics were going on. Granted, some of that started in the second quarter, but third quarter is where it exploded. So tonight, look for the third quarter performance, because if we've learned anything in these first four games, that's what's going to determine the winner in tonight's game. The network pregame coverage begins momentarily with the Bucs in Memphis taking on the Grizzlies. That's myself and Dave Kane. And then, as always, after the game, we'll be back to break it all down on Bucs Talk. We will talk to you then. The game is next, the Bucs in Memphis.
Just like the Milwaukee Bucks, Coakley Brothers has developed into a world-class national player. We perform office work for clients in the U.S. and Canada.